Maggie, are you going to give an introduction?
You might need to turn that up just a little bit, Dan.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. We were waiting for some of our representative candidates has been invited. If a candidate is absent, it's due to a conflict during this busy political season. And we can't do anything really about that. This legislative forum, though, is sponsored by the Iowa State Education Association and the Progressive Action for Common Good. And I thank you all as candidates for taking time to discuss the issues that are important to your community. And I thank you in the audience for showing up this morning here at the Bettendorf Library to have a productive discussion on the issues. This is a forum open to everyone who wants to have a civil conversation about issues. We expect a robust discussion, and we expect respect and civility. We are here to learn and exchange ideas, so please, no booing and clapping, no clapping during the forum. Now a little bit about today's format. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. After that, the moderator will read the questions submitted by audience members, and candidates will each have 1 minute to respond to each question. Now, you don't have to respond to every question, actually. Each candidate will actually have 2 minutes for closing remarks as well. So Marielle is going to be our timekeeper, and you really have only 1 minute to answer a question, so remember that when she puts her hand up. And our moderator is Danielle Salazar, so it's all yours, Daniel.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. As a reminder, we have 2 minutes here for introductions, 1 minute here to answer questions. After that minute, I will start to interrupt you with a kind thank you that will grow louder as the longer you take. Please try your best to watch what's going on over here. We'll have questions from the audience, and since there are so many candidates, not everyone will be able to answer every question, so I'm going to choose at random here. Keeping track, and if your opponent is here, they will most definitely have the opportunity to go after you, so we can have that conversation. All right, so without further ado, in whatever order you like now, actually, you can go ahead and give introductions, okay?
Hello. I'd like to thank the forum for inviting me here. My name is Clyde Gibson. I'm running for Iowa House District 82. I'm a libertarian. I believe in personal freedom and individual rights. I think we should protect property rights, and I would love for your vote and a vote for me for liberty.
Hi, I'm Kate Pence. I'm running for House District 70, and I thank you all for coming today. Beautiful Saturday morning, and I'm glad to see that you're here. District 70 runs from the northern tier of Scott County, most of rural Clinton County, and the bottom 3 townships in Jackson County. And one of the reasons this district is so big is because 2/3 of our counties have lost population. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. I think too many Iowans are being left behind. I read in today's paper an article that Iowa is now #1 in defective rural bridges. And the article explained that some of these bridges, they only get 35 cars a day. But if you're living in rural Iowa and you're driving 45 miles one way to go to work, and when you have to take a detour because there's no longer a bridge there, it's a big deal. It makes it harder for people to stay in rural Iowa. And when I get elected, I hope to represent everybody.
Hello, I'm Andrew Onsgard. I'm running for House District 97 against Mr. Pankroken here. That is central and southern Davenport. And I'm also a libertarian. And I suppose I just want to introduce more individual liberty into the lives of Iowa people. So, that's all I got.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. It's a beautiful day, and I'm sure everyone is thinking about the yard work that you haven't done yet. But at least we know one is. Again, Ken Krogan, you may have heard of me. I'm currently among the Scott County Board of Supervisors. I also spent about 20 years as an executive with Genesis Health System. Yes, I am running in District 97. District 97 begins at the Davenport-Bettendorf town line, runs west over to St. Ambrose area, and then north up to 53rd Street. So it's possibly the most densely populated district in the state. In any event, I am a Democrat, and I too support personal liberty and freedom and all those other great words. The question is how, and that's what I'm hoping we'll talk about today. Oh, you got your. Oh.
Okay. I am State Representative Phyllis Beatty, and the change for me is Eldridge. I now have parts of Davenport, I had parts of Davenport, parts of Bettendorf, and all of Eldridge now. My new district is 94. I have been in the legislature 7 terms, and I hope to return. We've got a lot of things we need to get done, education being one of them, and so I want to go back and help do that. Thank you.
I think we're
Yeah, we're gonna have an issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, some of these are working.
Good morning, Good morning. My name is Craig Cooper. I'm running in House District 81, which includes northwest Davenport, North Davenport, all the way over to Jersey Ridge, and all the way west to 280 and north to 80. I am a first-time candidate. My background is I've had 2 careers actually. One with Mr. Krogan. He hired me when I was 52 years old to become spokesperson for Genesis Health System and corporate communication. I spent 17 years there. Before that, 24 years in the newspaper business as a reporter. And I told my wife this would be one last project. She said, "You're crazy." I said, "This is my public service." I support teachers, public schools. There's a lot of things we talk about. Mom, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for coming out on this very cool fall day. I hope you all have plans to be able to enjoy it as the day moves on. And I do want to let you know that I'll be ducking out a little bit early because I have a wedding to get to in Northeast Iowa, and it's going to be about a 90-minute drive, so I'm kind of keeping track of the time. But I'm just finishing my 6th year in the Iowa legislature, and it has been an amazing experience. I tell people that in the legislature, you learn something every single day. So for me, because I love learning, it's been a great 6 years. My work career, I've spent all my working years in social work and education-related work. The most recent being 27 years at Scott Community College. So I am very concerned about people issues. I'm very concerned about education, workers' rights, health care. Of course, the topics go on and on. And I also believe in Iowa. I think this is a wonderful state to live in. And I think that we have an opportunity to make it the best state to live in. And that's the goal that I would like to set forth for everybody here and in the legislature. Thank you.
questions from the audience, all right? So the first question here is, would you work to make healthcare more accessible and affordable by strengthening Iowa's Medicaid program? And we'll just go ahead and go with Phyllis.
Yes. Yes, that's a simple answer. Yes, definitely I would do that. One of the things that, when we look at this is that we have so many people in need. This is an area where we need to take a look at and make sure that people are getting what they need. I think the other thing that's important is that that's something that the legislature hasn't done in the past, and we need to take a harder look at what we can do. And so, I'll let someone else answer that too, but for me, this is a kind of an easy yes. And whatever we can do to make this easier for people, I'm down with it.
Would someone like to respond?
Well, just... Okay. Just to give an amen to Representative Fee, having worked in healthcare, I'd like to put a little meat on those bones so people understand the how serious the problem is. Iowa consistently ranks 1, 2, or 3 in terms of quality of healthcare available to the citizenry. We also rank 1, 2, or 3 at the bottom of reimbursement. So the disparity between recognizing quality and encouraging is enormous. And it truly does threaten the future of healthcare. We consider Medicare payments. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Wonderful. And Onsgard?
Oh, just one?
Yeah.
My answer to the question is no. I would not do so by expanding Medicare, Medicaid, or any government program of the like. I would do so by reducing government barriers to entry into the free market. For example, I don't know if everyone's aware of this, but in order to build a hospital, you need to get a certificate of need by the community. And that doesn't introduce competition into a market. There are significant, especially in the healthcare industry, significant barriers to entry into the market, which reduces the amount of competition, which reduces your options, and essentially drives down service and increases prices.
Thank you. We have the last one, okay?
Yes, kind of building on what has already been said. One of the things for healthcare in Medicaid is for someone after the birth of a child. Right now, they lose their Medicaid after 60 days, and we know that almost half of the maternal deaths happen between 7 days and the 1 year after the birth. So if you want to protect maternal health, that would be a good way to expand Medicaid. Another issue is mental health for children. Iowa is near the bottom in availability of mental health coverage for children. We have something like 8 providers per 100,000 children in Iowa. So especially in the rural areas, it's very difficult. And I was reading the statistics on this because I talked to a man at the door yesterday whose son is a first-year teacher. And one of the things he was saying, first off, is that his son is so surprised at the low pay, he doesn't know if he can afford to stay as a teacher. And we talked a while about pay, and then also, I says, well, other than that, how's he like teaching? And he said one of his students committed suicide this week.
And then, so that's the time we have for that question. Moving on. Last year, there was a consideration of a school voucher program in the Iowa legislature. What is your position on this issue? And Clyde,
I do believe that private schools and homeschools should be available to all Iowans, but I do not believe that the state, with taxpayer money, should be subsidizing private industry. That's all.
and Monica, or
I guess it's on.
Talk loud.
It's not.
Just talk loud.
Yeah, talk loud.
I support public school money going to public schools, remaining in public schools. We've always had a choice. Families can choose to send their child to private school. For some of those children, that's the best thing that could happen to them. Families do that. They have always sent kids to local schools. I just don't think we should support private schools with taxpayer money. And just before I get off on this, the problem in the rural schools is they get hit harder, almost harder, by this than public school. Have you ever seen a public school close in a small community? It's devastating. They lose their identities. That's the only thing.
Yeah, education is a huge factor, and I totally believe that public money should be going to public schools, especially because our public schools have been, have been underfunded for over a decade now. Every year, the cost of the money allotted to public schools has not met the need based on the cost of living increases. And this year is no different. We got a 2.5% increase, but we all know how high inflation has been this year. And we are losing teachers to other states because of the wages that we're able to offer. I talked to someone whose daughter had gone to school to become a teacher. She found out when she graduated that there was no way that she could live on that salary, so she moved to Illinois. We need to fund our public schools.
Thank you. And moving on here. Next question from the audience. Last year, Iowa passed a law that allows the purchase of handguns and carry them in public without training or a permit. At the same time, the state experienced a increase in deaths related to homicide and suicide. What is your plan to address the issue? And we'll go ahead and go with Ken.
I believe that people carrying handguns without a requirement of training is nuts. And I would do all within my power. There are Second Amendment rights, I get that, but reasonable gun control is essential to us moving forward as a nation. We lead the world in mass shootings, and this just can't go on.
Andrew?
With no restrictions on anyone's ability to get a firearm, whether that's a handgun or a long rifle, shall not be infringed. I think that's fairly clear. That's all I got.
All right, and we have time for one more. Phyllis?
Yep.
Oh, here we go.
I think the thing that we gotta remember is that if we look at as our life right now as it exists, everything that we do, we've been asked to be responsible. Now I'll give you an example, and that is when you're driving a car, you have to have a license, you have to pass a test. You have to do those things. It's not being restrictive to your freedom or to your rights or anything like that. It is simply asking you to be safe and protect the people that are around you for their safety. So if we look at some sort of safety measures for, just like what we talked about earlier, it's not to restrict your right, it's to make sure that you are safe and to make sure that your family is safe. And so when we look at this, rather than look at it as a negative, remember, this is about safety, that's all it's about. And so whatever we can do to help with safety, I'm for that.
Thank you. And moving on here to our next question. Iowa used to be first in the nation in education. What would you do to make Iowa great once again in education? And we'll go ahead and go with Clyde. Sorry.
Right now, we have a student loan crisis in America. And I know that that's caused mainly by the federal government, but it is based on the fact that we subsidize the colleges in Iowa as well. I would like to see a more competitive market and make it easier for new colleges to open up so that way we can specialize in certain things. If colleges teach every single subject, then they might be diluted on those subjects. We should have a robust system of education, and we should teach our students to seek out education outside of those in trade schools and other opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see our public schools fully funded. And I don't remember all the questions.
And it used to be first in the nation, and
Oh, yes,
what
yeah.
could we do to make that happen again?
Yeah, for the fully funding of our schools to get us back into the league, and respect for the educators. And when I was talking to the father of the student, it's the first-time educator, he made more money on his summer job while he was going to college than he's making now as a teacher. And so I think that's shameful that someone with a 4-year degree can't make more than someone that had a high school diploma. And not to disparage anybody on any job. It's just like, we need to raise all wages so everyone can have a living wage job.
And we'll go with Monica.
Research has shown that class size makes a difference. And one of the things that happens in schools is when the budget is not, the money is not enough to cover the needs, class sizes grow. The other thing that we know from research that helps in terms of education is good, solid preschool education, which is absolutely essential, especially when families are struggling to face and deal with childcare and finding places where they can have their children taken care of. Our families are under a lot of stress. Part of what I think it means is that if our schools are going to be doing a really, really good job and moving up in the ranking, that they need to look at education as a holistic environment. They need to have the appropriate counseling and support services, health services that are required to make a good experience for children.
Thank you.
Daniel, can I just say that we have to retain teachers. COVID was difficult for teachers. A lot of them left the field. We have to give them incentives to come back, especially good teachers that we lost because of COVID. And now we're at the start of the school year, there were shortages all over the state of teachers. We have to get them back into the classroom somehow by supporting them, by paying them, but mostly by supporting them.
Alrighty, and then did you? Okay, last one.
There's no such thing as fully funded public education. It has never been and never will be considered to be fully funded. When a private institution doesn't work, it goes bankrupt. Publicly, when a public institution doesn't work, it gets more funding. It gets expanded. So this is called in economic terms a perverse incentive, and there will never be an instance where we will ever acknowledge that schools are adequately funded. We need more robust competition in the marketplace of education.
Ken, would you like to respond? Or?
Well, only to agree with what a lot has already been said. Education is the bedrock of democracy, and public education is the bedrock of education. My parents thought it was important that I go to a Catholic school, They paid for it, they had the choice, and they did it. But not everybody was in a position where they had the resources to compete or consider the competition of schools. Public education is a core essential service, and it must be adequately funded. If fully funded doesn't exist, adequately funded certainly does, and equal funding clearly does. Right here in Scott County, we have two of the largest districts, Davenport and North Scott, funded at rates less than Bettendorf and other institutions.
So moving on here to our next question from the audience. Black and brown teens are arrested at a higher rate compared to their white counterparts when they commit the same offense. How would you plan to address this social injustice? And we'll go ahead and start with Craig. Robert.
I'm not sure I'm an expert on this. It starts with building communities, and I think police, law enforcement is trying to do that right now better than maybe they have in the past. By building communities, in the community, and building trust within the community. The other thing is, I don't think that building new cells is necessarily the answer. We're just going to keep filling them up. You'll never have enough jail cells. I think Ken wants to say something.
This is a very important issue to me, and I've been struggling on the county board with this. Not only are these children arrested, but they're incarcerated. Brown and black children are incarcerated at a rate 10 times higher than their white peers for the same offense. The county's response has been to build a juvenile detention center, although they would have us call it the Juvenile Justice and Rehabilitation Center. But it has twice the number of cells more than twice, 40 beds. We've never had more than 17 children in the Juvenile Detention Center. So clearly the strategy here is to create a regional juvenile detention center and make Scott County the focal point. So, just again to put it in context, Iowa leads in the nation in the incarceration of black and brown children, and Scott County leads the state in the incarceration of black and brown children. If more jails ended crime, it would have worked by now.
Thank you.
Black and brown people are more disproportionately jailed, and I agree with my Democratic counterpart that the solution is not to build more cells. It is to decriminalize nonviolent acts, such as drug offenses. You know, it's true, black and brown people are, disproportionately vilified by police and et cetera for, nonviolent acts. And how many people are we destroying the lives of by locking them up in a cell? If we want to expand, the money that we put into incarceration, and I know I'm a libertarian, and I should be advocating for decreased, expenditures, but it could be put into, at the very least, if we don't decrease our burden to the taxpayer, we should at least put it into a better situation where we're advocating, where we're supporting the people with drug addiction programs rather than incarcerating.
Thank you. Okay.
I just, agree with everything that was said here. I think that we could have more support for the families. When we know that children have adverse events in their life, they're not traumatized. And we need to spend helping the families before we get into a position of an arrest or an incarceration.
Another issue, I agree with Andrew that it's attacking, that minorities are put incarcerated at a higher rate. Another problem is that in inner cities where most minorities are because they go there looking for jobs, that a lot of things to start a business is hard. So a lot of them turn to an easy way to make money, and that could be selling drugs, that could be doing illegal things. And if those barriers to entry into the marketplace were not there, then they could go and build a business. They could build wealth for their family. They could get out of poverty if those restrictions were not there.
Thank you. And moving on here. Next question is, do you support the 6-week abortion ban proposed by Governor Reynolds? And we'll go ahead and start with Phyllis.
No. I was gonna say no.
And Monica.
I can answer the same way with one word, no. Healthcare decisions regarding abortion need to be between a woman and her family, doctor, whoever she wants to bring into the decision, not with the legislatures and the government.
And Clyde.
So I'm going to answer a more complicated version of that. Personally, I'm very pro-life. I see that child is at conception a child. But I also realize that there's a situation where there's two different rights being violated, the rights of the mother and the rights of the child. So therefore, it's a moral argument and should not be legislated. It should be pushed down to the family, or the doctor and the patient, and that's where I'll.
Thank you. And would you like to add?
Yeah, I read something about Bill Clinton 30 years ago. He was running for office and he said, they asked him about abortion, and he said it should be safe, legal, and rare. Now they've changed the rare, I feel like it should be safe, legal, and confidential. It's between, I have no way of understanding what the woman may be going through, and I'm certainly not going to legislate against it or for it.
Thank you.
I too will give a resounding no. Bodily autonomy means that a woman or a man, for whatever reason, can make those decisions on their own. I don't even support, the notion of fetal heartbeat. At 6 weeks, it is not a heartbeat. It is an electrical charge that people are hearing. No one knows when conception begins. No one knows when 6 weeks later is. Bodily autonomy means a woman can decide what is best for her, and she doesn't need to make excuses, certainly to me. Rape, incest, it's her decision, and she can make it on whatever basis she chooses.
I'll just about make a clean sweep here again and say no. I'll build off Clyde's reasoning here is that even if you consider the death of the unborn to be murder, let's take the most extreme position here, you're still violating the right of bodily autonomy for the mother. And so in this instance, we can see that you have a violation, you have a conflict of interest between negative rights, the right to bodily autonomy and the right to life. This is the only instance where that can ever really happen. And so when you have a situation where there's always going to be a negative outcome, the government shouldn't come in and legislate and decide which negative outcome that's going to be. So no, it should not be legislated.
Thank you. Moving on. The question is, what will you do about Iowa's minimum wage being $7.25? Yes. And we'll start with Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you so much. Because I've been in the legislature so long, this is an issue that's really dear to my heart. It's been since 2008 that we have not raised the minimum wage. Now think about it, all of you. Think about all the things that have gone up in your lives. Houses, buying a home, electricity, purchasing a car, clothes. All the things in your lives have gone up exponentially. 725 has not kept up with any kind of inflation. Now this is ridiculous. Now whether you agree with it or not, here's the point. If a business operated that way, they kept everything at the same rate, would they get enough money to keep their business? Probably not. So we, as citizens, need to raise the minimum wage. I'm definitely in favor of that.
And then Monica.
I'm definitely in favor of raising the minimum wage. As Phyllis said, it hasn't been changed for way too many years. All of our neighbors, all the states around us, have a higher minimum wage than we do, with possibly one exception. And that exception is escaping me. It might be Wisconsin. They may still be at $7.25. What we need is the requirement that a wage be able to provide a living, and $7.25 an hour does not even begin to make that happen.
Okay.
We need a living wage in Iowa. In the counties that I represent, I looked it up, what it would take to live, rent for a single person, and they need at least $12.50 an hour. And when we allow employers to pay less than a living wage, that's saying that we're going to consciously, taxpayers, support that employer. And often that's a very profitable employer. So when we pay food stamps because the person can't feed their family, free and reduced lunches for their children to go to school, housing subsidies because they can't afford to live anywhere. If we're going to make a conscious decision to support a corporation, we should also do the discussion of, is this really a viable business? If they can only viable business if they're paying $12 or $13 or $10 an hour, I think we should look at that. And there may be some workers that we would want to have the dignity to work and they don't have the skills. We should make the decision to subsidize individuals, but not the whole system.
Thank you.
I do not think the government should be dictating what the marketplace should be doing. I would abolish the minimum wage. This is something that it restricts the market. If someone is worth less than that $7.25 an hour, then that means they're not employed. If it's above, I mean, what you're talking about is wages, things are going up, costs are going up. That's because of government influence with inflation. I mean, inflation is going up. You're true. It's true that someone can't live on $7.25. It's true. And that's where private discussions, or entering into a contract with your employer or through collective bargaining, that's where you would push that up. That's where you would push up your wages. It should not be legislated from the government. Thank you.
And then, okay, you want to say something?
I would also favor an incremental increase in the minimum wage. By incremental, I mean over several years. But right now, you can see the marketplace is kind of handling this issue itself. There's lots of jobs open, $14 an hour, $15 an hour, $22 an hour. If you want to look at meat processing. But I still think we need to increase the minimum wage to 15, but do it in segments. Make it $10, then 12, then 15, then 20. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And then moving on here. Next question from the audience. What is your opinion about the use of eminent domain for the use of private for-profit CO2 businesses? And we'll go ahead and go with Monica.
I think landowners have rights to make decisions about the sale of their property. And I also think that a private corporation should not have the ability to take over private land for their own profit. We're talking about the carbon dioxide pipeline. It's not even certain that that will work. My big concern is that Iowa we've done great on wind power, but in terms of other types of energy systems, we are still hanging with the fossil fuels. And even the ethanol that we're using now gets blended with fossil fuels. It is not a fuel in and of itself. And we need to really take a good look at where we are with the energy crisis.
Thank you. Kate?
I think probably everyone on this panel is going to have the same answer on this. We are strong supporters of private property rights, and we are opposed to eminent domain for private gain. And especially when we're talking about the carbon pipelines. This is a hazardous substance. And if somebody does not want to have it by their homes, their schools, their neighborhoods, they should have the right to say no. And the government should not be telling them that they do not have rights.
So this issue is the reason why I ran. My district includes all of Cedar County. The pipeline goes through Cedar County. I mean, this is a 2-mile corridor that's going to stretch across the entire county, and it comes into Scott County as well, and then off towards Clinton. This is something that using government power and abusing that power to take land or take easements for a private company, we'll be honest, they're doing this so they can sell to states who want green energy. They're wanting to sell our ethanol as carbon neutral to other states who are banning cars in 10 years. So they're not going to be using it in 10 years. This is something where the taxpayers should not be subsidizing and the arm of the government should not be taking people's land.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you, Daniel. I just want to flip this issue on its side for a moment. No, I don't think that eminent domain is appropriate in the case of the carbon pipeline. But I also don't think it's appropriate for jurisdictions, and Scott County did this just a month ago, to prohibit local farmers from entering into agreements for solar energy production. Utility scale solar energy is essentially banned in Scott County right now, and that's by action of the County Board of Supervisors. Again, perhaps we've been hanging around too much, but usually Mr. Onsgard talks about negative rights and positive rights, and this is a case where in both cases it's just wrong and shouldn't happen.
Thank you. Andrew?
It is wrong, it shouldn't happen. I'll double down on that. It sounds like another clean sweep. I would not support the use of eminent domain from private to private ownership for the same reason that, as I wasn't able to mention in the last question, I don't think that we have the authority to dictate collectively as a public what private individuals should transact with between each other. So in terms of the minimum wage, that should be abolished too.
So moving on, this question is addressed specifically to Kate, and we'll let her answer first, but then others are free to answer as well. So the state of Iowa continues to struggle with water quality, particularly from runoff of fertilizer, manure, and pesticide. To resolve this problem, increased regulation, again, to protect it and preserve our wetlands, lakes, rivers, and streams, and voluntary programs do not appear to be adequate. What would you do to address this issue?
I'm a strong advocate for clean water, and sustainable farming has been around long enough that people know what needs to be done to keep their topsoil and their nutrients in their fields. And one of the problems we have is that some of the farmers that do want to do this are, there's not enough support to help them transition from the traditional way of farming to the sustainable farming. And I once proposed in 2010 to have a natural resources and outdoor recreation trust fund, and part of that money was to help a permanent funding source for sustainable agriculture. And I'd like to see that fund. Currently there's no money in it, and I'd like to see that funded.
And, Phyllis?
I'm going to go back to something Mr. Hogan talked about, and that is the solar energy piece. And one of the farmers who was there talking about this, it was really very, very good. He talked about why he was getting into it and why it was important, for him. He sees this as a way of the future, getting into solar energy. If we get a lot of this thing of giving, incentivizing, and making sure that farmers are able to make good decisions for themselves, like solar energy. They don't always have to farm corn or beans or whatever. They can move into something else that is beneficial for the community and beneficial for the state. So I think we need to help incentivize a lot of farmers to look beyond what they've been doing and move on. And the other thing that I need you to understand too, unfortunately, a lot of our family farms are shrinking. We have more corporate farming now, and so we've got to make sure we take a look at that as well.
Thank you. And Monica?
We know what to do to help with the water crisis, and currently Iowa is the biggest offender. Voluntary efforts have not worked. I think it's time to go to mandatory, but I think to make that more palatable, we need to subsidize certain types of activities. We know, for instance, that the more crops that are in rotation, instead of corn, beans, which is what we've tended to do in the past, adding that third crop would be highly beneficial. Cover crops are, and so on and so forth. We know what to do, but there has to be both a carrot and a stick in order to get the job done. And we have to stop being the biggest offender and contributing to the dead zone down in Mississippi.
And Greg?
This is kind of personal to me. I swam in most of these lakes when I was a kid. I swam in Eldora and Gladbrook and Beach Lake and Hampton, Backbone State Park, and swam in all these. I would not swim in them today. In fact, week after week, there are warnings for the swimming in these lakes. That's unacceptable. We know how to decrease the runoff. It's just a matter of making it mandatory that we do it.
Thank you. We'll go with Clyde.
So what if I told you that this problem with water runoff is actually caused by the government? The farmers only grow corn and soybeans because that's what they get crop insurance. If that crop insurance wasn't there, then they would diversify and they would think about those things. I believe that we need to head towards regenerative agriculture and permaculture in Iowa. This is not sustainable. I mean, since they started farming this, early 1800s, we've lost 12 feet of topsoil. 12 feet of topsoil. That's something that can only be done by removing the barriers to entry and allowing people to grow things that normally aren't grown in Iowa.
And we're actually going to move on from that question. Another one here from the audience. Where do you stand on ridding Iowa of puppy mills? And we'll go with Phyllis.
Yeah. So part of the problem over the years is that we have not had enough inspectors to look at these puppy mills. It is regularly in the paper about something happening with these puppy mills. These dogs are being mistreated, they're dying. We need better regulation, and I know a lot of people may not agree with that, but listen, when it comes to animals dying and getting sick or unhealthy, we really need to have someone take a look at this. This is not acceptable, not acceptable. If I am going to be purchasing an animal, I want to make sure an animal is in good health. And I want to make sure the people that have these animals are doing what they can to make sure that these animals are well taken care of, fed well, make sure they have medication, make sure they're treated well. So we need a better way of getting these things investigated.
Thank you. And we'll go with Monica.
We definitely need more inspection of the puppy mills. We are, again, number one or number two in producing what is supposed to be domestic animals, and we're treating them like livestock. Every time the stories break out and you see the ugliness of what's going on in puppy mills, it just makes me cry, actually. We need inspections in puppy mills, or in kennels, that produce puppies. And we also need inspectors all over the state and a lot of things, including things like nursing homes. You cannot inspect a nursing home via internet. You have to go to the nursing home. Again, it's one of those budget issues, along with many other budget issues that have been ignored in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go with
I'll keep this short. The problem is not just the inspections or the regulations. They are required to be inspected on a regular basis, and the owner is supposed to be there. And we have a lot of times where the inspector goes out to inspect and they're not able to get access. Or they do inspect and there are violations and they're not fixed. And the people's licenses are renewed. If there was enforcement of the existing regulations and they were not able to inspect and they were not able to relicense, that would fix the problem.
Thank you. And we'll move on here to the next question. The topic is immigration. What are any immigration issues at the state level that you envision working on? And please explain and elaborate. And we'll go with Craig.
Again, something I'm not that familiar with, except all I know is that a lot of the immigrants coming to the country legally and illegally are contributing to our society. They are working, they are buying cars, they're buying homes. I'm not in favor of shutting down, quote, shutting down the border and making it impenetrable, because we need these people. We need them to become citizens. I would fast track them to citizenship, and as long as they did not commit a crime, I would allow them to stay in the country.
Thank you. And Ken?
Again, I'll give an amen to Craig's comments. I've worked at the border with immigrants seeking asylum in the U.S., and our system of processing immigration is just woefully flawed. We could do this in a much more expedient way, in a way that discourages illegal immigration. I don't know that anybody is crazy about wading through the Rio Grande. It'd be a lot better if they could walk across a bridge, express their desire for asylum, and be processed in much less time and relocated where they're needed. You can't ride down 53rd Street without running over a help wanted sign. And I don't know where these workers are going to come from in light of our lowered birth rates.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like many libertarians, I favor completely open borders. I don't think there should be any restrictions with regard to immigration across state lines or national lines, but the question was specifically about the state. So in that regard, I would say I would do everything legally in my power to prevent the federal agencies from deporting people in Iowa.
Thank you. And we'll go with Monica.
You asked about the state level, and there's an elephant in this room that isn't being mentioned, and that is that our governor said about the immigration problem on the border, that's their problem, keep them there, refuse to take refugees to Iowa. But when Ukraine happened, which was awful, she was more than welcoming to bring in Ukrainian refugees. Brown people, white people, You know, I think that we have a responsibility to help people who are in desperate need of a place to live, and Iowa needs workers. It's a win-win for us.
Not only that, but she sent troops down there, right? National Guard.
So this is an issue that is close to home for me. I go to a Spanish-speaking church in West Liberty, and it's filled with immigrants. I think 90% of my church is first-generation immigrants, first-generation Americans. This is an issue where these people want to be here, they want to work, they want to have a life, they want to be your neighbor. This is something where I think at the state level, what we can do to help is stop persecuting these people. They should be able to get a job. We should get rid of the e-verify system in Iowa. It's none of the federal government's business who Iowans choose to hire. And we can't do this at the state level, but a path to citizenship at the federal level would be the answer for these people who came here legally. And we should allow them to get driver's license. They need to get to work. The average person drives 30 to 45 minutes here in Iowa to go to work. How are they going to get there without a car? Thank you.
Thank you. And
One of the things that Iowa could do on this issue is crack down employers that are misclassifying their employees. And by misclassifying, they have people that, for all intents and purposes, are employees, but they call them independent contractors so that they don't have to pay the taxes and they don't have to track their workers. And, you know, that hurts all workers, not just the immigrant workers. And if we attack that issue, I think we could help.
thank you. So based on some of those answers, there was a suggestion of maybe having some type of ID and identification. So the follow-up then is, at least here in the Quad Cities, QC Interfaith, along with others in the community, are working to promote a community ID that is not just for immigrants, but does include them as well as veterans and other peoples. Pretty much another form of identification other than an ID. So the question then is, would you support some type of community ID here in Iowa? And Phyllis?
Yeah, yes, that's an easy answer too. I would support that. The other thing is, let me say this too. If that would help take out that argument about whether they should be here or not should be here, or should be here, I think that really would be helpful. I think right now we're stuck. Somebody's on this side, somebody's on that side. I want to eliminate that argument anymore, and by having something like this, a community card or whatever you want to call it, by having that, we know that they're here. We know that they want to be here. We know that this is a place that says, we're welcoming you, we want you here. We want you here to work, we want you here to live, have a home, feed your family, be part of society. So definitely I'd support that.
And Andrew?
No, I support that, but just for the reason that I don't think that these people need to be tracked and managed, just like, they should be able to have all the same abilities that we have. So this community ID would be in place of the driver's license.
Just as a form of identification.
I mean, if it's mandatory, no, of course I don't support that. If you want to have that, sure. I mean, if it's voluntary, there's nothing wrong with that.
And then, okay.
And indeed, we're putting together a proposal for a Scott County community ID right now in hopes of building momentum toward a state ID. So if you feel passionately about that, please contact your board of supervisors.
Thank you. And then, was anyone in general want to respond?
I'll respond. I don't think, like Andrew said, that we should be tracking these people, but sometimes an ID is required. Most banks require you to have an ID to get a bank account. Those things, if the banks will accept them, then I would be okay with in a voluntary manner. Let these people identify themselves. But I also think that they should be treated as Iowans. They're living in Iowa. We as Iowans shouldn't care what their citizenship or their immigration status is. We should see them as Iowans.
Thank you. Moving on here. As anyone from a small town will tell you that population seems to dwindle as time moves on. So the question is, moving forward, what do you think can be done to encourage people to come live in Iowa as well as to stay in Iowa? And we'll go ahead and start with Craig.
The one thing I think you can do is head toward a cleaner, greener manufacturing base so that we can attract skilled workers to the state in these particular fields. Like we did the same thing with wind power. Now there's wind power maintenance in colleges taught. We have to get ready for the next generation. It won't be my generation. The next generation of workers in Iowa are going to have different skill sets than they do now, and we're going to have to start thinking about a cleaner, greener economy and manufacturing base. That's how we're going to attract younger people to our community, I believe.
Can I take that?
Sure.
And I agree with what Craig had said, but I'm going to give you a really goofy example, so I apologize right away. I was watching a commercial on TV, and I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's the Liberty Mutual commercial, and it's really, it's kind of funny, it's hokey, but you know what? They really are trying to put fun into having something that you need. And so I believe that's what we need as well. We need something more touristy to bring young people here. We actually do. We watch as young people, and they say, there's nothing much to do here. We need to look at something that's fun for them. Attractions, those kinds of things, tourisms. So if we can bring those kinds of things to the community, I think that would be very helpful. I think young people are looking for things to keep them here, and this is one thing that will keep them here.
I'll agree with Representative Thiede on that, and indeed it's partially the reason why I've invested so much in the River Bandits over the last few years. But more importantly, I think we need to create free college. A dozen years ago, I led a referendum that failed miserably, called the Davenport Promise, that would make college available using sales tax dollars to anyone who could get him or herself into a college. And actually it was only 2 years, but it was a start. I think those are the things that are going to bring young families and the very families that we would like here, those who are focused on their children's education and advancement and that sort of thing. There's any number of things we could do to make Iowa more attractive, and sadly, I don't think we're doing any of them at this point.
Thank you. Andrew?
Let freedom reign. I mean, civilly, if you, allow people to have more civil freedom, you're going to attract a lot more people. And just juxtapose like California and Florida right now on the economic side, it's both civil and economic freedom attracts people and businesses.
Okay.
One of the things that, kind of building off of what was previously said, is having something for people to do. Iowa is tied with Nebraska with the least amount of public lands available. It's less than 3%, and half that land is probably in our ditches. So if you want to have something to do, parks or trails or any type of outdoor recreation, we have to invest in it. And the fundings for the parks have actually declined since 2010. We have over $1 million of deferred maintenance in our state parks. And the remedy to that is to kick the rangers out of the parks. And they've started having dynamic fees. So if the demand goes up, the fees go up. So then we're pricing low-income people out of even visiting our state parks.
Thank you. Monica?
Really quick, Craig just passed me a note saying bison. You know, it may sound like a really unusual idea to have bison on an old bridge, but wow, nobody else has done it. And sometimes new ideas are the best ideas. So I think there are definitely things that we can do, and especially because we have a beautiful, beautiful landscape to work with. Now, I have to leave because I have a wedding to get to, and I don't want to walk down the aisle after the bride. So thank you all. It's been great being with you, and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And following the trail of where the note came from, Craig, would you like to say anything more?
I spent time in Minnesota, quite a bit of time actually, and they've done this in 3 state parks. They've introduced bison herds in 3 state parks. Actually, there's a few bison in Iowa, but they make it so that you can drive through and see them there. And if you've ever been to Custer State Park in South Dakota, 1,200 head of bison, and they just free range. They walk across the road all the time. It's this might be a small thing, but it's an attraction. And we need more attractions to our state parks. And I can't agree with Kay more. We need more land that's dedicated to natural use. It's available. It's probably farmland now, but or prairies. But we could do that.
Thank you. Moving on here. How would you help refugee families in the Quad Cities in Iowa? Because we currently have several refugee families here and as students in our schools. And we'll go ahead and go with Phyllis.
Thank you for that. The other night, we were at a religious forum and where we had many families of diverse backgrounds. It was awesome. It was really, really very good. And some of the issues were education. Some of the issues were the abortion issues. Some of the issues were, just varying things. And so the best thing that we can do to help with refugees is that we need to find out what their needs are. Like the other night, we sat and we talked. We need to continue to do that. Beyond the talking, we need to make sure we institute policies and procedures that would help them. So if a pathway to citizenship is one, that's one thing that we can help provide. If there is a pathway for a job, we need to make sure that they are, a pathway to make sure that they can get a job. So we can do that. We have things already in place. All we have to do is make sure that we do it.
Thank you. Ken?
Well, again, it's hard to legislate how people feel about things, but one thing we could all do is be involved in that effort. I work with a World Relief Organization over in Moline. Could do a lot more of that sort of thing. Again, through World Relief, I've worked with a young man from Argentina and this family from Cameroon, who, by the way, want nothing more out of life than to be in this country and work and contribute. And that's all they're looking for.
Thank you.
Why not?
Andrew?
I'll double down on what Mr. Croker just said. Yeah, we need to take care of each other. I know this is coming from a candidate for representative, so the question is whether it should be legislated or not. I don't think it should be legislated that we're forced to take care of one another, but I would hope that everyone would join me in a voluntary effort to take care of our fellows. And with regard to the fact that they're refugees, I mean, they're humans, and all humans have the same basic needs. So I don't think that the classification of being refugee is really any different from our local folk.
Thank you. Moving on here, we have a question, again, specifically addressed to Clyde, but afterwards, whoever may respond to. What do you see as the most important government spending in need of cutting or reducing?
I'll answer this in a broad way. I do think that spending is out of control across the country, across the state. I know we have a surplus in Iowa currently. I do think that things should be reduced in spending. We should find wastes in the process and eliminate them. I've gone through courses at work that has been waste reduction. It says 70% of a process is waste reduction. So even if we're not financially reducing it, we could eliminate a lot of the waste in the systems.
Right?
I have always thought you could probably reduce budgets by 10% and no one would know the difference. And I don't know how extreme that is. Phyllis can tell me better than that. But, I just think that 10% reduction in every single budget, and you probably wouldn't know much difference. And right now, the state is sitting on $2.2 billion. Unfortunately, a lot of that's going to be one-time money. So anyway, we'll let Phyllis take over.
Oh, okay, I'll just say this really quick. You know, like so many other things, our budgets, they are determined by what the need is. And the example that I'm going to use, because it is our biggest budget, is education. When we look at education, everybody has a different view on it. And so I'm not going to say the wrong or right, but what I'm saying is that we need, if we just use common sense when we're budgeting for education, we need to make sure we fund it in an appropriate manner that helps meet the needs of education. Now, I talked about earlier how costs have gone up, right? If costs have gone up, then we need to use that as part of the criteria when we're figuring the budget. Not every budget needs to be the same, but every budget needs to be looked at and make sure that it is adequately funded so that they can do the things that they need to do.
Again, I'd like to turn that a little bit upside down. I don't believe we have a budget surplus in Iowa. I think we have a failure to appropriate. The education example that Phyllis just mentioned, well, yeah, you have a surplus in your budget, but you have various school districts being funded at different levels, none of them adequately funded. So that's not really a surplus. But to the specific question, again, I think our justice system needs to be trimmed back dramatically. And we've already talked about spending $30 million on a juvenile justice center that we don't need, we've never needed, and we're not likely to need it in the future. How much of that money could go into job training or daycare or the issues that keep people from being successful? Thank you.
The short of it is that if you name a budget, I'll name a budget that needs to be cut. If I'm going to be more specific, some of the more harmful ones are regarding our penal systems and our enforcement systems, which, again, I don't think we should be hurting nonviolent offenders. So I'd say probably, drug-related task force would be number one. A lot of the
I was just gonna add, a lot of times there's corporate subsidies and loopholes that are put in place. And we're paying a lot of profitable companies to do things that they would be doing anyway, such as research and, research tax credits. If they're gonna be a viable business, they're gonna do research. And after they're well established, do we need to keep subsidizing them every year to the point that they pay zero state income taxes or get money back from the state?
Can I just add one more thing? And I'm sorry, because I forgot to say this. So, no matter what the budget is, if it's 8.2, 9.2, whatever the money is, we can only spend up to 99% of that budget, okay? So, I don't know if it matters so much about cutting budgets. I think you need to understand that Iowa has done a good job at knowing that we can only spend up to a certain point. And so, I guess I'm struggling with cutting budgets. I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. Are we cutting just for cutting's sake? And I don't know if that's wise. I think the best thing for all of you to understand is that the budget is the budget, and we can only spend up to 99% of that budget. So that's the thing that I wanted to tell you.
Thank you. So moving on here, and this is probably close to one of our last questions. Recently, there has been a nationwide limitation on reading material that can be found in schools for students. What is your position and stance on what has been described as the banning of books?
I'm taking that one. I'm going to do that one first. I'm doing that one. Okay, first of all, we're in silly season now. This is silly. We have always, in the 28 years I have been in the school system, parents can choose if their students want to read a particular book or tell the teacher, I don't want my child reading that book. That's always been that way. Always. I can't emphasize that enough. So now we have people going into school systems and saying, take it out of there. We shouldn't be doing that. No, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have to do this. This is silly. And to argue about this just makes no sense to me. So I'm not in favor of this because we've always had this ability to come and say, I'd rather my child not read that. Or I want my child to read that. So let's just stick with that. It makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Captain Underpants, To Kill a Mockingbird, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. Those are all books that some people want to ban. My opponent, who is not here today, calls it porn. P-O-R-N. My feeling is, as Phyllis said, parents can decide what their children want to read. Don't make a decision for my children or grandchildren. And by the way, I'm on the board of trustees in the Public Library. So they have a banned book section right now, which I love. I think it's great. But to take Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn out of school libraries, George Orwell in 1984, to take some of these books out of the school systems would just it'd be devastating, frankly. And you'd be controlling the thoughts of the kids. So, anyway.
And let's go here to Clyde.
I actually think this is not a problem for the state legislature. This is your local school board issue. And if you don't like what's going on in your school district, run for school board.
I'd like to agree with much of what's been said already. I think 2 weeks ago was Banned Book Week. Did anybody pay attention to that? I learned at that time that the most banned book right now is a story, it's an autobiography of a young black gay man. And it's called Not All Boys Are Blue. And there was nothing wrong with this book other than acknowledging his coming of age and all that sort of thing. There's no idea in the world that's so scary it can't even be considered or explored. So if anyone's going to be deciding who or which books are on the shelves of our libraries, I'd like them to be librarians. That's the basis where we start.
A lot has been said about how we shouldn't be banning books. Let me take this ridiculous ad absurdum here about Mein Kampf. I mean, if we're talking about, like, this, a lot of this goes back to, I believe there should be a lot more free market public education, right? So a parent should be allowed to choose the school that does not stock a particular book that they personally don't like. So the fact that we're tying everyone together, forcing them to go to a public institution, maybe not forcing, but basically coercively taking their money, not providing them a lot of options but to go to public school, kind of makes this point moot.
Thank you. Okay, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to add that research has shown that students that feel a sense of belonging in school are more likely to perform better academically and less likely to be absent, engage in risky behavior, experience emotional stress, and misbehave. And, you know, there was a stunt in one of the school districts in my district of a teacher that had had a rainbow flag and a Black Lives Matter flag in her classroom for over 3 years. And suddenly it became an issue. And, you know, so there's a stunt at the school board meeting, and my opponent brings out a "Let's Go Brandon" flag. And, you know, kind of a "be careful what you wish for." And I thought it was disturbing that he couldn't distinguish between trying to make every child feel welcome and safe and then hate speech. And we recently, this week, my grandson moved in with us, so after, you know, a lot of years, my husband and I are figuring out what's going on in schools. I have had more contact with this teacher on a daily basis. I don't know what a full-time working mom does.
Thank you. And actually, we are just about out of time here, so I just wanted to make sure you had a minute or so just to give some closing remarks, okay?
Can I start? Because I need to,
Sure.
if that's okay. The one thing I want to say today is that when you're considering any of us, you know, as candidates, the one thing I want you to think about, it's not about our ideology. That's not what this is about. It is about what is the most thing that we can do for you, whether we're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, what is something that we can do for you that resonates with you? And I tell you that because we can say a lot of different things, but what resonates with you? What is important to you? What do you find that can help you make your life better? And so I want you to think about that, and I want you to understand that all of us would like to think that we have the answer to everything, but that's not necessarily true. All we can do is present to you like we did today, and you as the listener have to decide what resonates best with you. And so I want to thank you, and I want to leave you with that.
Thank you.
I just want to say thanks to everyone who came today and got engaged, got involved. Notice who's not here today. One of the people not here today is my opponent. She made the insurrection. She was there on that day, and the day after, but she couldn't make it here today. I wish she could have, but it would have been more interesting, I think, to talk between each other. We don't have all the answers, especially a freshman legislator, 70 years old almost. Ken will actually be the oldest freshman, I think.
Maggie, are you going to allow that kind of comment? I thought this would be civil.
He's a couple of years older than I am. But it's important that you use your superpower, and that is your vote. Go to the polls, make sure you vote, find a way, somehow, show up. And hopefully we can make some progress that way. Thanks for everybody coming today.
Thank you.
I too will add my thank you for your taking time to come and learn more. And I think the value of these kind of events is not so much about the specific issues that we're talking about, although some will still be important next year and beyond. But this is about values. It's not what we think, it's how we think. And the exploration of our position on the specifics that we covered today hopefully gives you insight into how we think, because that's what's going to matter in the long run. And vote for me.
I just wanted to thank the Republicans for not showing up today. It's really nice to allow libertarians to be highlighted like this. I'll leave you with that. Thanks for attending. Appreciate your attention.
I am running because I want a free and independent future for my kids. If I don't stand up and have this viewpoint available to people electing me, then who will? My opponent was running unopposed, and that made me get involved. Because I want liberty on the ballot. I want freedom. I want people to love their neighbors, to not do harm to their neighbors. I want issues to be solved locally. And if you elect me, I will push issues to the local, the community, to the family table. It is not some legislator in Des Moines making the rules for your life. It's your life, and you should live it. Once again, I'm Clyde Gibson. I'm District 82. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I really enjoyed taking your questions and knowing the concerns you have. I have knocked well over 5,000 doors, personally talking to my neighbors in this district. And I go to Republican doors, no party doors, Democrat doors, because I'm not wanting to be a Democrat, I'm wanting to be a representative. And I want those people to know that we may not agree on 100% of the issues, but they know me, and they know they can call me. And I especially appreciate the libertarians that are here today, because that's what I'm finding at the doors, that when you're talking to people, you probably agree on 99% of the issues. And that's the important part, that you talk to people. And there's a way to, it doesn't have to be all one way or the other way. When you're talking to people with different opinions, you can probably find common ground that will work for the people that we're there to represent. And again, thank you very much for coming. And I'm Kate Pence, House District 70. If you know anybody in rural Clinton County, Jackson County, or Scott County, give them a call.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, our time here has elapsed, and I thank everyone who chose to participate in democracy today. Please join us at our next event taking place October 22nd at the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency for Iowa Senators. And as you leave here today, I hope it's with the audacity to believe that you can make a difference. And remember that it's ordinary people who do extraordinary things. Thank you.